Hey everybody, welcome back to another Ninja RMM MSP live chat. I'm Jonathan Crow, Director of Content Community at Ninja RMM, and I've got a full panel of amazing guests here that I will introduce in just a second. And first I want to say thank you so much for joining us. All the familiar faces in the chat. We got Kelvin, we got Drew, we've got Matt, all you wonderful folks sharing your pizza and fries and burger emojis, making me hungry. Tom is actually calling in. Tom Weston, our Channel Chief Advisor. He's joining us from a cafe, so maybe he will be having some snacks later. But Tom, you had some travel issues, but you've powered through, and you said you wouldn't want to miss this.
Yeah, I spoke at Build It, IT by Design conference on Tuesday, and then was trying to get out of town last night, and they put us on the plane, and that's right when the storm hit here in New Jersey, and the plane was rocking back and forth. They just boarded us and then stayed in the hotel, and I'm hanging out in the coffee shop until I can take the train down to DC.
There you go. All right. Well, Tom, thank you for powering through. Because you have some amazing stories to share about this topic, which I'm really looking forward to, as do the other folks here on the call. So Alex Farling from Lifecycle Insights, a familiar face to a lot of the folks here. Alex, sir, thank you so much for joining.
Absolutely, thanks for having me. I don't have nearly as exciting a story. I haven't been thrown off a plane lately or anything cool like that.
Really? That kind of surprises me.
When I get thrown off a plane, I do it with more style than that.
Well, if you're gonna do it, if it's worth doing, you gotta do it right.
Do it all the way. Yeah.
And then we also have Georg, who's president of Valiant Technology, based out of New York. So you're at the epicenter of some of this weather that stranded Tom, but it looks like you're doing okay.
Yeah, we did okay. We only lost power by where I live for a couple hours last night, but we had the generator kicked on, so we were fine. And no big disasters. And luckily the ISP stayed up and running, which was like a minor miracle. So I was really happy today when I got out of bed.
There you go. Yeah, you're not dealing with a ton of frantic clients and everything. You've taken time to join us here.
We did okay. We only had one client in particular that had a flood, but luckily their server room is a couple of feet higher than their normal office. It's built up a little bit, so it didn't impact the production, which is really good. The warehouse, on the other hand, I don't want to imagine the insurance claim, but that's not my purview. So, which is good.
Not my problem. There you go.
Two kinds of problems.
And then well, thank you, George, so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to you joining this conversation.
Thanks.
And then Dom Scafidi, our content manager. How you doing, Dom?
Doing pretty good. Weather's actually pretty good here in Chicagoland for once, so I'm surprised about that. Hope you all are doing well.
Yeah, and Dom, I'm excited to hear you're going to be sharing. You've been working with Alex on a cool asset that we're going to give to everybody here on the call as another thank you for joining us. We've got a sales process guide with a bunch of checklists, and Dom, you'll be going over that, so that's going to be something cool to check out. Yeah. So for anyone who this is a new experience for you, welcome. And as you can tell, we kind of keep things informal here, especially with this chat. We're really looking forward to hearing from you guys too. So we're talking all about winning competitive MSP deals. I think we want to kick things off by just asking you in the audience, are you engaged in a competitive deal right now? Is there anyone on the call who's dealing with something where it's a competitive situation? Let us know what's going on, because we would love to hear from you in the chat, and then also maybe bring you on. We can give you some input on it. We'd love to hear about what you're going through, or if you've recently gone through a competitive situation that you either won or lost. Either one of those situations we'd love to hear about. And also, to help guide some of this conversation and give you guys some resources, I'm going to share a link to our resources doc, again, here in the chat. And consider this kind of like our show notes, right? So we've got some information about our guests and how you can follow up with them, which you totally should. And we also have shout outs to, if you have any trouble with Crowdcast, you can also stream this. We're streaming live on Facebook and LinkedIn, I think LinkedIn. And then we also have a Slack group where the conversation can continue. So join that, and we'll be continuing to chat right after this stream is over. And then we've got links to a few other things too, including a rough agenda, although we'll see where this conversation takes us. Yep. So to kind of kick things off, again, yeah, like anyone who's in the chat here, I'm kind of interested, like, if you're dealing with a competitive situation right now, let us know. I'm also interested in how common this is, right? And I know Alex, George, Tom, you guys all have your MSP experiences. You all have kind of different experiences and different types of clients you service. And so I think how often you were dealing with competitive situations kind of varied between you guys, right? Tom, let's hit you up first because I know you dealt with a lot.
Yes, I did. I operate in the DC area. And so it kind of flows down through the federal government where, in addition to applying for federal contracts sometimes, also the state and regional and local municipalities would follow usually a GSA schedule. In addition, government contractors often did something in line with what the feds did. So I was a lot of competitive bid situations. And we're going to get into some of the particulars of that and what I look for to make sure it's worth even putting a proposal in.
Yeah, and I know one thing that came up when you were talking about this was a situation where a lot of these bids, they weren't always quite what we see. And we have in the doc here the Mad Max, like, that's bait gif, right? Because basically you were saying, like, you got to be careful because you could go into certain situations with government entities or nonprofits where they're required to accept multiple bids, where they're just checking a box and they actually may have the person they know they're going to go with already on hand, and you don't want to waste time, right?
Yeah, one of the things, Jonathan, and I don't know how common this term is out of there. I think Alex probably knows it pretty well because he's in close proximity where I was, but we call it wired. So when they already know who they're going to really want to bring on, but they have to put it out for bid in an RFQ format, there are often ones where it's actually wired to someone else. And there's things you can do to determine if a RFQ is actually wired, they have someone in mind, and make sure you don't waste your time.
Yeah, I mean, were there any kind of like warning signs where you just be kind of direct about it? Like, how do you cut to the chase there? Specifically with like, the bids.
Right. Well, specifically what would happen is often you would look for an incumbent. Has this contract been around for a while? Who has been in on it? How many years have they been there? These are questions you can ask. Who had this contract last? Who's doing it right now? How long have they had it? Have they gotten renewals on that contract? So if it's someone that's gotten a renewal several times on it, even though it's going out for bid, they're just doing that because they have to. There's a board. If it's like a nonprofit, there's a board that says we have to take bids. If it's a government contract, they say they have to take bids. And they're just doing to run through things. So I would look for ones where I would probably only bid on one where I knew that contract had changed hands a few times in the last decade. If it hadn't, I'd know it probably was a red flag.
Yeah, and the other thing I'd add to that is sometimes you can tell without even having to ask anybody about that. If you're dealing with education contracts and E-rate, that's all public knowledge. If it's municipality and federal, quite often there's something published on who won the contract last, and you can go back and track that contract history online without having to even engage with the contract recipient or whatever.
Yeah, George, I know you got experience with this too. So, I mean, you guys have won bids, and then you have the flip side of like, okay, these are good things that you can win on, but you're also kind of wary sometimes too.
I think a lot of it too is how the bid's written is a really good reveal. If it's like really like so specific on things, it's like, wait a second, someone not the client wrote this. Like, who wrote this bid, right? I think that's always a big deal. It has these really like detailed kind of requirements, and unless they're a really large organization that could hire some kind of like third-party person to write it for them, you really find that they're just like these like super complex RFPs, and you're like, wait a second, this is just kind of like written by the incumbent, so that the incumbent can say, oh look, we wrote the bid, and now we satisfied the bid, and they're giving you those kind of things. And that's really and you're just kind of like, well, okay. And, in the past, I remember years ago, we spent, interminable number of hours writing bids for these projects. And it was just kind of like this, like they were just collecting bids. And, and after probably, I hate the 10th, maybe 15th time of doing it, we're kind of like, wait, this is a bad idea. I'm wasting a lot of sales cycle, a lot of mental energy. And you start putting that in your PBR. And that's a bad place to operate from. So.
Yeah, I'd like to speak about it real quick. Jonathan, I have one thing on that. Yeah, you can often tell if maybe the incumbent MSP wrote the bid or not, and it wasn't the client. You can tell if it was written by people that were technical or people that written it sitting away from them. And if it was written by an incumbent, I can tell you, you're probably not going to get it because they wrote it so they can get it again.
Right. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, George, you were saying that you guys actually developed a process too to respond to these, right? Just try to kind of streamline it, try to take away some of the time that was getting dumped into these, right?
Right. Well, we took a fairly complex one that we had done. We were actually on a pretty good. We thought we had a good crack at it. We didn't win it, but what we did is we kind of took a lot of the questions, because most of the bids kind of, generally speaking, and at least the spaces that we operate in, our verticals, are very similar, at least in the terms of the language, tone, questions they're asking. They're looking for, this is, who's how many years of service these people have, and all those kind of like stock answer things. And if you can like templatize it, you can save a lot of time, because in reality is, how many different ways can you write a bid, unless if it's, once again, written by an incumbent who's like directly, and you're like, wait a second, there's no way that this is open. It's kind of like, is it wired? So I think having that template really saves a lot of time. Obviously there's upfront work in it, but it should be part of your normal day-to-day sales cycle. So,
and I think it's important to stress the difference between a nonprofit or somebody who's required to go out and get 3 prices and a formal bid process for the federal government or E-rate or education or something like that. And those are not only 2 different animals, but there's 2 different ways to attack those animals as well. Because if you've got a structured process, you can't cut in line, you can't cheat, you can't rearrange things in your favor. If it's an unstructured process like nonprofits, there are a lot of things you can do to circumvent the bid process or flex and twist the bid process in your favor. Making sure you present first or last, never in the middle. Just little tricks you can do when the process is less structured.
So Alex, let's talk about that a little bit more, because I remember you and I talking about your MSP and you mentioning a lot of times you would kind of try to actively avoid competitive situations. Here we got Paul. Thanks for the comment, Paul, in the chat here, saying unless he has a prior relationship with the client, typically stays away from bids. Yeah. Alex, am I getting that right? Am I recalling correctly? You kind of would avoid some competitive situations, right? In
certain circumstances. So I knew what it took to make a competitive bid flow in my favor, and we did 3 verticals that all required competitive bidding. We did a lot with municipalities, small towns in Delaware. We did a lot with fire departments, mostly volunteer. Those were more loose. They required 3 bids, but there was very little structure around those. And then education and E-rate required multiple bids for it to be put out for bid, listed on public websites and things like that. The E-rate ones, you could tell when it was written by the incumbent. It would say, we want specifically this make and model of switch, and we want specifically,
Right.
When you see that, it's like, okay, I understand where you're going here. This one's right. Paid for. Moving on to the next, right? And we actually paid a company to bring us those bids, bubble them to the top of our mailbox, let us know when they were happening, and we would walk away from 85% of them. Right. But the ones that looked like they were well written to actually be a competitive bid, where they were looking for a new vendor and new services, we would compete on them, and we did really well there. It's a high margin industry, vertical when we got into it, and it did very, very well for us.
I'm kind of interested, going back to you talking about the tricks for nonprofit, and in your favor, if you could get into that a little bit more. And then also, specifically with presenting first or last, because we got Paul saying again, like, always present last. How do you control that?
So there's good ways to get around it, right? Number one, just ask. Look, this is a really complex bid, and especially when they're not structured, you can get away with this. This is a really complex proposal. I want to make sure that you're going to understand it all. And other people are going to come to you with other complex proposals. I'd like to be able to compare mine apples to apples. So if at all possible, I'd really like to meet with you last so that we can talk about any questions or concerns that were left on the table by anybody else, and talk to you about how we're going to address them. If you have to go first or second or whatever, opt for first or last. If you go first, close with, there's going to be a lot of folks meeting with you after me, and you're going to forget some things. This is complex stuff. This isn't an insult, but the waters are going to get muddied between now and the end. I'd appreciate the opportunity to circle back with you before you sign with somebody. And if you can get them to do that, now you can go poke needles in everybody else's big fancy balloon. And those little tricks make all the difference in the world. If you go first, you also get the opportunity to throw out landmines
Right.
for the other guys, right? You know where your blue ocean is. You know where the things are where you really excel, where you take out your local competitors and where you can beat them. So you can leave a little trap for them. And when you come back last, you can say, how'd they make out on that question that you were going to ask? That question that maybe I told you to ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I mean, so no one wants to be the middle child, is what I'm hearing.
It's terrible. It's the worst place to be.
It's a terrible position to work in because you're just kind of stuck, and then
you're dealing with the guy who laid landmines and the guy who's coming in after you to clean up and back cleanup.
Yeah.
And one thing you can ask for too is you can ask that before they make a final decision, if it becomes a competitive price situation, that you be addressed if all of the things are equal, and that you be brought in at that point. Because a lot of times what I found too is they appear equal to who's evaluating it, but if you can get your eyes on the other proposals, you often find things where they're not equal.
Yeah. Oh man. So I definitely want to steer the conversation into that point in just a bit, because we were talking about this in our prep calls and thinking, okay, there's what's the situation or scenarios are going to apply to the most amount of people here on the call. And yeah, okay, government, nonprofit, education, like not everyone's going to be going after that. But I wonder if almost everybody on the call has been in a situation where like they get towards the end and then the client's like, I'm just going to shop it around. Or, you find out situations late in the game, you got underbid. Yep. But before we get into that, I just want to circle back around really quickly. Alex, you mentioned landmines, and that's something that we put in the doc too. Any kind of examples of what you're talking about? And George, maybe we can hit you up next on this too. But yeah, when you're talking about laying a landmine for a competitor coming after you to fall on, like, do you have an example of that?
Well, we all know who our competitors are or were. Some of them either insisted on weird changes to the client's environment to get them all over to Netgear equipment or something like that. And
right.
I had a competitor who would rip out perfectly good gear just to throw in his Netgear stuff, and then he'd want to charge the customer a $10,000 onboarding fee, and I would just hardware as a service it all. And I knew that, and we didn't mark up our Haas that much. We used it as a differentiator, right? I'm going to bring you all cloud managed gear that you don't have to worry about. I'm just going to take care of it. If somebody else comes to you and tells you it's $10,000 to replace all your gear, just keep in mind, baked into my price is the fact that I'm not charging you that.
Right.
That's a huge one. When somebody comes in and my onboarding fee is $2,500 and theirs is 10 or 15 grand.
That's really true.
I think Jonathan really hit on something that I've found very common, is that it doesn't start out competitive, and then maybe it's even your client or someone you're a prospect, but they decide to make it competitive down the line. I think that's what Jonathan was talking about. They allude to all of a sudden you're in a competitive situation, you didn't see that coming. Right. That's a good point. What do you do in that situation? What do you say to the client? Because you came into this thinking you're probably going to get the gig, and all of a sudden it's competitive. Alex, what are your thoughts on that?
You don't even want my thoughts on that, because my thoughts are you screwed up to get there.
Yeah.
If we followed a sales process on the way in and said, look, I'm going to be the most expensive guy in town or close to it. Is this thing going out to the cheapest guy in town, or is it going to be a price bid, or is this about deliverables and business results when we get done with this, right? If they tell you up front, oh my God, well, your price, if you're that expensive, I can't work with you. Okay, great, we're done. I don't have to put the work into a bid. If I got a budget from them on step 2 or 3 in my process, and then I come back to them in the budget and they're backing away, it's because I failed somewhere else. I didn't answer a question. I didn't solve for a concern. I dropped the ball in my sales process.
I'm going to say 1,000%. I mean, if they don't know what they're going to spend with you after the first maybe 1 or 2 interactions of phone call, you're not being transparent enough for the customer. And in some ways, you're just kind of doing, like, I would say, sneaky sales tactics. But it's like, you don't want to have that kind of end where they throw a hand grenade in your process because you think you had it closed. And then like, oh, by the way, a friend of ours came in, and I'm going to tell you, I learned this only by, typical. I learned it by the hard way, never the easy way. You never learn this stuff. I think you learned it. If people tell you this, but until you actually do it. I know years ago we had a competition. We were the in-house IT for a company. Last hour, we're doing a big build out for them. The last hour, the architect referred someone, and the other company won this big like telephone / networking job that we were banking on, because they were just able to undercut us and got into our client's head a little bit. that sort of thing. And we failed. That was on us because we weren't controlling the customer or the conversation or the qualification. So it happens really fast, and you have to always be really aware of it, I think, at all times.
Well, and that speaks to why you should have a fast sales process, right? Why you should be able to get from introduction to data collection to presenting a bid and closing quickly. And it just kind of proves the point that, if somebody threw a hand grenade into your sales process, it was probably you.
100%.
It's usually because you pulled the pin and threw the pin. That's usually why you're in the process.
Actually, more like you threw the pin, put the hand grenade in your pocket, and it said, "We won this account, awesome."
Right.
And that's never like, And I think I think the other thing is that so much of the process of vetting clients has to be earlier in the process, right? Like, you shouldn't know they're a bad client when you sign the deal, right? You should know that, or potentially, like, you should know that in like 1 hour in the conversation, maybe that 1 hour at a time, because you could. I mean, listen, all of us have done this a long time. You start talking to people, hey, these people are going to be a real hard customer. They don't get the value. We're going to be fighting every time with them. They balked at everything. Why bother pursuing it? I think that happens over and over again. And the more maturity you get as a business, the better you suss that out. I mean, Tom's nodding because I'm sure by the time you're done, you're like, yeah, you got it. It goes fast.
Yeah, I like what Alex had to say, is that making that process really quick is going to eliminate a lot of these competitive bid situations, because if you're taking time between your discovery to where you give them the proposal, that is time where they're wondering where your proposal is, where they start making other calls and talking to other people. And I would try to get this process done in 1 to 2 weeks generally. And I found if I stay with under 2 weeks, it makes it very hard for them to go through a competitive situation.
Yeah, it's funny. So this is a perfect plug, and Dom, I'll tee you up here in just a second for talking about the sales process guide, right? And so this is something that we had Alex on a live chat last year and had all these great ideas come from it and some materials. And Alex, I remember, I think my original thing was like, let's have a live chat around sales objections. Like, everyone wants to talk about how to deal with objections. And your response was just like, everyone's going to hate this answer, but if you get to the point where you're dealing with sales objections, you've already messed up. I
might not have said messed up, but yeah.
Yeah, I think there may have been a different word choice there for sure.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it goes back to this chart here, the 4 things you need to close a deal, and then where do all sales objections stem from? It's trying to get to the decision before establishing number 2 or 3, or just letting it go without properly establishing 2 and 3. So there's that, and that's a little sneak peek of the guide. And again, if you go to this doc, you'll be able to download a PDF that kind of walks through. It shows you an example of a funnel that kind of reflects what Tom was just saying. What does a sales process that's 7 to 10 days look like? And again, this isn't going to apply to everybody, but it's basically just to get your gears turning and to start thinking about it. And then we've got checklists that includes an awesome example of a technical assessment that Alex has put together and provided via Lifecycle, and also some qualification questions to go through. So it's a really cool asset. Dom, I kind of stole your thunder, but I'm going to let you talk about it a little bit too. So Dom, you worked on this with Alex and kind of fleshing this out a little bit. Do you have anything else you want to add about the process, Doc?
Yeah, I think the best thing about this document, you talk about the funnel and you talk about this, how to close the deal in 7 days or how to hop off the deal if you're not going to go with it. The best thing about this funnel is that each stage, there's actually a checklist to go with it. So it's not just a really great funnel picture where you're like, these are great things on how to close a deal, but what does this actually mean? There's actually a process to go with each one, as Jonathan was saying. It's a checklist to go with each portion of this process here. Alex had some really great stuff on the technical evaluation portion that is very, very deep and thorough, outlining exactly each step of the way what you need to do. So, highly recommend taking advantage of downloading this kind of free resource in the doc. And Alex, anything to say on that portion or just anything in this document?
Every MSP has a little bit different DNA. Don't hesitate to take this and customize it and make it your own, as long as what you're adding to it is not your own head trash. If you start finding reasons why the doc won't work, you're the problem. If you start looking at it and saying, well, I don't offer that service, or I offer products and services that aren't included here, and I want to do a deeper discovery in this area or that area, great. Make it your own, customize it. It should sound when you get done with it like the things you always say to your customer. Don't come to this and try and rebuild your entire vocabulary and nomenclature around it, because it won't be authentic and it won't work. The worst thing you can do when trying to pick up sales is go to a workshop, listen to a guy talk, and come out of the workshop trying to be Alex Rogers, right? He's a great salesman, but he's all over the place. He's got this dynamic that just consumes the room that he's in. And I sent a salesman there, and he came back and he went, I can't do that. And I went, oh God, I failed. The reason for you to go was not to do that. It was to learn the things that he's doing that are successful and figure out how many of them you can say authentically in your language, and find other ways to do the other things, because you still have to check those check boxes, right? You still have to get a budget, even if you're not comfortable walking up to your customer and going, what's your budget, right? We still have to find a way to get there. So all I would say is keep it authentic, customize it, make it your own, and best of luck. Reach out if you have questions. To Dom, of course, not to me, because I'm
Jonathan, I wanted to speak to some of the process. In my last couple of years, I started getting into a lot of competitive situations. And so what I did instead was I would do, generally these were coming in referrals or from internet advertising, calls in, do a little bit of discovery on the phone, schedule a network eval as soon as possible, go out on it, like within days often, go out with the tech and do the network eval, ideally have a meeting right there with the client. I would have up my laptop, my cost calculator. I already had some of the numbers filled in, and I would have my managed service agreement, both of which are available for downloads from Ninja. I would literally compute the price right in front of them, fill it into the proposal, email it to them right then, and we'd have the discussion. So I would often take it from, there'd be calls where I got a call on a Monday, and by Wednesday or Thursday, I was giving them a quote in person. And that right there eliminated almost all competitive situations, because they often were in a need right then, and I'm getting right in front of it and showing them how fast it would react right from the beginning.
I think there's a lot of psychology in that as well, right? Because people are in pain. Let's go back to your process. They're in that pain mode. You're solving that pain quickly, and and not that you want to trick them, but you're kind of handling it right off the bat. Versus, so it's like the classic. People are not asking questions like this, and they don't want to buy it. They just don't. But the more they think about it, and not to say you want to trick them or anything like that, but more like, hey, I have the solution right here, and this is what it costs, and they're like, okay, that works for me or not. So I think it's a really critical thing. I like that idea a lot. We do a similar thing.
What about guys like that scenario that we're talking about, where you go through your process, and then you do have the client basically wanting to have that time to think about it, and then what I've seen a lot of in forums and conversations is people complaining, being like, oh man, we sunk all this time in developing a proposal, doing the assessment, whatever. The client now wants to see it, and they want to take some time. I'm sure they're going to shop it around, and what's going to happen is I know I'm going to get undercut.
Sure.
And so how do you push back on that in a way that's I guess like firm but still productive? I mean, I think for me personally, I know that's going to put me in an uncomfortable position to really kind of demand that yes, and I'm sure that's probably true for a lot of people on the call, maybe.
Right.
Any advice on that? Because I mean, I think we have in the doc, we got the gif about the Shark Tank answer, right? Like you see them like when they sniff out like they're gonna get in this competitive situation. There's three of them. Mark Cuban's just like, tell me right now, or I'm out. Like, and you can't quite do that, right? Or maybe you can. I don't know.
I think you can, Jonathan. I'm gonna tell you what, if I felt like this should be mine, and especially if I was the incumbent or something like that, where I felt like it was going to go to me and it changed to competitive, I would often tell the client, the prospect, listen, I think if we're going to be more questions like this, I can see the direction it's going, I think we're just going to withdraw. And that can often have a very good impact, because then they're going to say, wow, maybe I'm making a bad choice because I'm going to lose out because of what they're doing. And you can stop.
Especially if they kind of liked what you were saying already. Right? If they already liked what you were saying, and then you're saying, well, you know what, if you're just going to go run this around town, this isn't the kind of relationship I want to have. They start to go, oh, there becomes a little fear of missing out there, right? We have a little FOMO, and they're like, hey, this guy's good. He doesn't need my business. What? He's already busy? I don't understand. And something about being busy just breeds new business.
Absolutely.
I did my process a little different from Tom's. I would collect all the info, and then I would have a follow-up call, and I would actually schedule that presentation call. And one of the questions I would ask was, if we come in on budget and have addressed all your problems, are you prepared to make a decision on Tuesday when we meet? And if they would tell me no then, guess what? I had time to talk through it with them. Well, what's holding you up? There's going to be a competitive bid. I tell you what, take his call first, then I'll come meet with you.
There you go.
Yeah,
no problem, right? So, there are things you can do to make sure, again, that you get to present first or last. There are things you can do to understand when you're in a competitive situation, and one of those is just ask. If I come in on budget and I've solved for all your pain, is there a reason we can't do business together right then when I'm presenting in your office on Tuesday? And that's setting the expectation that I'm coming prepared to sign you up and onboard you and do the work, and you should be coming pen in hand, either ready to tell me, hey, you suck, hit the road, or come on in, we want to have a relationship, right?
Right. Almost why would you want to waste a lot of your time messing around with this? If as you meet all these conditions, why would you want to continue this long drawn out conversation unless you hear some other, unless we didn't answer your questions? That's it. That sort of thing. I think that's exactly right.
Did in terms of going back to that, like the power of going last thing, like are you then specifically asking for the other competitors' proposal so you can react to it, or what are you doing there?
Well, when I get done with my proposal, I'm going to go, it sounds like we've come in within the budget that we talked about. I really feel like we've addressed all of your pain. Is there anything that we missed? And they're going to say, no, it sounds like you've covered everything. Is there a reason we can't do business together? Here's the paperwork. And when they go, well, I've got this other bid. No problem. Why don't you pull it out? We'll compare it apples to apples to mine, and let's talk through it. I'll help you make your decision today. If I'm not the best choice, I'll tell you that. And you can that conversation's powerful, but you only get to have that conversation if you've established your budget, if you've established pain, if your presentation solves for both of those, and if you set yourself up all the way through the process with, we were going to do business today, and now you're pulling back on for some reason.
Nice, and I just thank you for that, Alex. And Paul, I'm asking if you want to come on and talk a little bit. Feel free. No pressure, although maybe a little bit of pressure. But yeah, it would be cool to hear you talk through your process, because you've had some great comments here.
But Paul's spot on, right? First meeting, Tom's got his calculator. I'm in the back of my head going, $2,000 to $3,000 a month. I can float that big wide number out there. If they balk, at least I know I've hit the first problem. If they go, I can live in that space, life is okay. There's some Sandler bracketing technique in there that really works. I don't like the way Sandler does it, but you can use a bracketing technique early on, because let's face it, this far into the game, you should know at least a ballpark within a big wide gap of what your pricing ought to be.
Right.
Well, to that point, I mean, I'm glad you brought it up, because again, going back to that doc, there's good stuff in there, guys. So there's also if you've joined the live chats before, we've provided Tom has provided a pricing calculator where you can use to really pinpoint what your actual costs are, what your margins are. You can play around with the numbers and see how low you can go in situations like this without it being getting into the trap of okay, you won a deal, but now you're stuck with it and it's not profitable. That's not actually a win. So feel free to go in that doc. All of us at some point
won a deal we didn't really want.
Correct.
Sometimes we didn't realize it at the time, but we've all done it.
Jonathan, I want to own it here. I've kind of painted myself as a shark a little bit. Obviously, I am. What was happening was, if I smell blood in the water, there's an immediate need. Yeah, I'm gonna do things very aggressively and quickly, because as George pointed out, I'm seeing they have an immediate need. I want to fill it. I want to lock them up as soon as I've established they're a good client. So that's the reason for that accelerated pace right there. And I think many people miss out on that. If you're talking to someone who has a failure in their systems right then, or major problems with the incumbent MSP, you want to jump all over that, because otherwise there's probably going to be a delay. And if you're delaying and getting a proposal, they're going to spend time and go back to that incumbent MSP and try it again and again. Correct. And you're spinning your wheel. So like I said, be a shark about it. You see that blood, go after it, because there might be an opportunity you miss out if you take a little more time.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is, if someone calls up with a need, and you call into your, hey, we have a problem, hey, you referred us, we saw you, we figured out, and they say they have a problem, and they're willing to meet with you, you better go meet with them right away. Because I think a lot of people are well, I'm busy, it's not on my calendar. That's kind of one of those moments you kind of clear your calendar and say, I'm going to go meet with that person, because they have a real need right now. And I think a lot of people don't have that mindset, and you have to really be prepared for that.
George, one more thing. If there's a immediate need, maybe they have some small problem, they're calling you because the incumbent MSP still hasn't fixed this printer problem.
Correct.
I would take a tech with me and throw them a little free fix and then have that meeting.
100%.
And I'll tell you what, it goes really well at that point. Give them something for free.
Exactly, and I think that's for us. That's one thing we do. We a lot of times we like a little slower process, depending on what the situation is. But we always like doing like a bit of an assessment to understand what the environment a bit, and try to but not make it last like 6 months. It's not going to be this like robust, volume thing. It's I mean, there's value in it to the customer, but really it's like you want them to know what's wrong pretty quickly, and they know what's wrong, so you want to kind of match that together so that works for both of you. And I think it's a great way of knowing. And also the other thing we like doing is sometimes we like doing a small project. Say that someone does not really 100% ready for the sign MSP contract. Hey, let's do a small project. Let's dance before we get married. And depending on the customer, now you have to be careful with that, because I can bite you, because then you don't want to be doing time materials work, which sucks. I'm allowed to say that here. Time material is bad.
You already did.
Right, exactly. But I think that and and it's good for them and good for you, because you really kind of understand who they are, and you uncover more. Usually, you do one small thing with them, you uncover way more pain. Just to go back to what Alex was saying.
Yeah, George, real quick, I wanted to point out.
Yeah.
You point out something really great there. Sometimes what I would do is, if I wasn't quite ready, or they were still under a contract or something like that, maybe say to them, hey, listen, you've got some immediate needs. I'll tell you what, we can sell you some prepaid hours. I know I'm plugging like crazy here. I'm wearing a Ninja shirt and everything, but we have a prepaid managed service agreement that I put out a couple months ago. And I would do that. And what happens is a stepping stone. I would give them some hours for maybe a slightly reduced rate. I'd have them on some kind of contract, but it's one step closer to full managed service agreement. And it kind of ties them to me. And I can now start solving their problems and get a little income from it.
Right. That's great. That's great. It's a very similar thing. That's a great idea. Just to kind of get them also used to the way you work and your service team, and why you're better than the incumbent, or if they didn't have one, why they need one. I think that's an important thing.
And it never hurts as you mature and start to collect numbers like the cost of obtaining a new deal, to be able to pad that with, and we did a little bit of project work for them to help them pay for their own cost up front. Because as you mature, it's important to say, hey, you know what? We bid on 4 deals for every one we close. All combined, it costs us $10,500 to land a new customer. How long are they going to stay? What's our total lifetime value on that customer? There's some math there that you need to do. If you're bringing on bad customers just because you're too worried about, I've been on three quotes and I couldn't close any of them, you'll do that when you don't know the numbers. You won't do that when you go, okay, it cost me $10,000 to bring on a new customer, but my lifetime value of a customer is $138,000. Okay, no problem. Right? The math still moves me in the right direction.
Correct.
So speaking of the numbers there, the other question I see all the time is people asking about, I guess going back to that scenario, right, where like the client's asking for the proposal, or maybe in a different way, like people are just asked, hey, should I be charging for my proposal or charging for an assessment? And I've seen a common answer be like, yeah, you should, and then you can offer kind of an incentive here where if they sign with you, maybe it gets subtracted from the first month's payment or something like that. But I'm just kind of curious how you guys handled it, because I see that question a lot.
So I can go first. I'm not sure these guys go next. We generally, if it's someone we don't know, have no skin in the game, we charge for an assessment. A small token, not expensive, but just to offset some costs. And actually, it's more of a test of the person's willingness to spend money than it is to do anything else. And if it's a referral, like someone referred us, we don't charge for that as a courtesy to the person referring us. I know it's always the best, most mature thing to do, but we get a lot of referrals, and we've gotten some really great referrals over the years. So we want to kind of give back to the folks that usually if it's in a referral situation, we do pretty well on those as well. They're almost always you do. They're warmed up. So
yeah, we didn't charge for them in most cases. Occasionally, we would use it as a barrier to somebody we weren't sure was ready, to kind of litmus test them. But I don't think we did that. I don't think we did it 10 times in the 17 years I owned my MSP, because we knew if we got so far as to running the assessment, it was because we'd gotten them through a pre-qualification. We'd done a whole bunch of work for them already. And if we came in and presented, we felt like we knew when we presented, we had the opportunity to win the deal. We knew the math. We knew what we were up against. We knew it cost us almost $11,000 to get a new deal, and we knew our customers stayed with us for 13 years on average. It was a no-brainer do more assessments, make more money. I wasn't in a situation where I was burning deals. So I think you have to establish that for your MSP. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer there. But I think that if you find yourself doing 10 assessments and closing none of them, you probably should start charging for them and maybe start looking inside and figuring out which broke.
13 years average customer lifetime. Alex, your skin is so glowing. What's your secret?
My secret is that I wore myself out because I took every phone call and was available and accessible to our people. Right? We solved problems when they came up, and we took care of them. I hired good people over smart people, and we trained them into smart people. And we were a customer care organization that happened to fix IT, and those relationships went a long way.
I did something similar to Alex. I didn't charge assessments unless I thought it was maybe a little suspect. I thought maybe they were just shopping or collecting bids. So what I would do is I would say, if I didn't think they were serious, I'd say, okay, we're going to do $300 for assessment. Just some kind of number. I didn't ever actually charge that. I ended up giving it away, but I used it to see if someone actually wanted to move forward in the process. But I didn't see that I didn't want to get in the habit of it. I felt like it would be an impediment if I put it out there for every single one.
Tom, did you make it kind of like a last minute, like, okay, here's what I can do? Like, remember how we're going to charge for that? I'm going to give it to you for free. Was it like a little sweetener at the end or something?
Yeah, I kind of sit there and be like, once I felt like maybe they were collecting bids, like, who else are you talking to? Like, they're talking to like 3 other MSPs. I'd be like, well, I got to tell you something. This takes a lot of time to do, and you're going to get valuable information that you can probably use in your process to collect bids. So we have a $300 fee for that. But I'll tell you what, we're going to waive it if you go ahead and go with us, or if you actually have a meeting with us, something that they have to do to get that refunded. But the reality was never actually charged.
Right. And everybody loves a deal, right? Do you guys, George, you guys do anything like this? You wheel and deal at all? Like have any kind of like little?
Oh, sure. I mean, look, if you're at the final mile, you're gonna do what you gotta do to close a deal, right? I mean, as long as you're managing your costs, right? And one thing that goes back to what Tom and Alex were saying earlier, like you really got to know your costs of the delivering service. You have to know your costs of your sale. If you don't have that stuff kind of dialed in, you're just making deals to make payroll, which is a really bad place to operate from. You're getting desperate. You're just kind of like, taking on really bad customers that in the end may just suck the resources and the life out of your team. So you really got, I can't stress enough only by pain do I learn this. So I don't want to come across like some guru in any way, shape, or form. But I think that if you know your costs and then the deal and they're pushing too hard on it, like say someone wants to cut costs, this and the other thing, you walk away from it. I think I think you have to be willing to walk away from any deal at any time, mentally and emotionally.
Yeah, but you asked about wheeling and dealing. Like, let's be honest. George said it in the beginning. There's some psychology to sales.
Yes,
and part of that psychology is everyone likes to feel like they won.
Yes.
And the guy who's stroking you a $3,000 a month check, it's hard to make him feel like you won. If you give him a risk assessment, that's a good start, right? This thing has a $900 value. Here it is. This is everything I know about your environment. Oh, you picked somebody else? I'll leave you the cover page. I'm out of here, right? And that's a fair conversation to have. This thing, I'll write $900 check. I'll leave it. But if you're going to pull the rug out from under me at the last minute, I'm just going to detach that cover page from the rest of this, and I'll be hitting the street.
Right.
And we did that. We went to every presentation ready to close. Contract ready, sign here. If they said, I don't want to sign, I'm not ready to sign, we left the cover page off the presentation. It had the pricing. It had the solution we were going to deliver roughed out. All the detail was gone. We left it behind. We walked out the door. No problem. Call me back in a week when you're serious, and I'll be back.
Right.
And most of those would still close because the folks realized that we were legit. We weren't just fooling around. The guys who would just mail it in, they lost the deal every time. When I would fall out of my own process and just mail it in, I lost the deal every time. I haven't owned my MSP for 11 months now, and there's still a deal that in the last year of owning my MSP that I got busy, lazy, I don't know what it was. I mailed it in, and I'm still mad at myself for it because I know it was mine to lose. It was mine to lose, and I mailed it in, and guess what? I have no idea who does their IT now, but it wasn't me.
Right.
Oh man, there's speaking of the wheeling and dealing and the two sides of that, right? Like everybody loves to win, but going back to George's point, knowing when to walk away. I did have the competitive deals thing on the promo graphic. We got the Boston Gloves thing. We got Alex as what was this guy's name in Rocky? What was the trainer's name? Anyway, you had this quote, Alex, that you dropped.
Yeah.
And I've altered it a little bit, but there's always going to be someone willing to go into bankruptcy faster than you. And like, so this is something you would actually say to clients in some cases?
Well, I would tell them there was always somebody in the IT industry willing to go bankrupt faster than me. They'd come to me and go, well, so-and-so can do it for half the price. And I'd go, well, he's either doing it out of his mom's basement or he's in a hurry to go bankrupt faster than me because I know my costs.
Right.
And it was kind of a softball starter to a serious conversation about, I know what this costs. If he can give it to you for that, he's obviously not doing, it's not the same solution. He's not delivering what we're delivering. When he's at $45 a seat, it cost me that to buy the tools and employ the people. So there's no margin there.
Correct. I mean, we just won a customer because the customer wanted to know that we existed as we said we were. They had worked with another company that was very much like just seemed like a bunch of different parts together, but it wasn't a real MSP, right? They wanted to see, hey, can we come to your office and see your space and see if you're legit or not? And I was like, that's why it costs what it costs. Like legitimately, this is why it is what it is. And they signed the next day because it was like it validated that there's a reason why it is what it is. So
my account manager used to like to bring deals to our office for the final presentation.
Yeah,
and
it's powerful.
Like, I want them to meet the people. We have good humans. They'll come in and they'll realize that we're not a bunch of antisocial people in pocket protectors working in a basement somewhere. They will realize that we're actually humans. We'll shake their hand. We'll look them in the eye. We'll talk to them, and I'll walk them around and introduce them to the people they will be working with. I'll set a little bit of that psychology in motion, that car owner's syndrome, where they go, "You're going to look great driving this car, right? These are the people that will be solving your problems for you. Come on in the conference room and let's talk through this proposal."
Right.
And it was effective. I didn't do it. I learned that from an account manager that I hired late in my career. But she was good, and it worked. And there's a reason I had to steal her from a $30 million a year MSP. So.
There you go. No, it does work.
Yeah, guys, there's a question that came in, and we've got about a little over 10 minutes left. So everybody in the chat, if you have questions you definitely want to have these guys answer, feel free to jump in. So this one's from Jamie. What would be the best way to migrate a current client from break fix package to managed solutions? I've been with this client for over 4 years, started small. They only had 2 staff members. Now they're up to 10 users. They like to have bi-weekly meetings. Any advice there?
We'll stop giving away your bi-weekly meetings for start.
100%.
Because it sounds to me like by that time you're going to be, if you start charging for that, number one, those meetings will go down. Or they'll want to get to managed services, so you don't charge for every touch point.
Mine is to go ahead and look at all their billings you have for them, probably eliminate the first 2 or 3 months that you had them, take those numbers, punch them into our cost calculator, figure out what that price is, and then go to them with a proposal that has that, and talk to them about maybe set up a QBR schedule. So they're on that. Just talk to Alex about that, of course, and get them on a regular cadence of that. The meetings are going to happen at the same time every quarter. And this is what we do, and give them a flat price.
Right. Alex Rogers has a number that he really likes that is, and I keep mentioning Chartech because I think Chartech teaches a fantastic foundation for MSPs, especially around sales. But they say your business review structure, I hate the phrase QBR, we use it because everybody in the industry uses it. You should be doing a strategic business review, a cybersecurity business review, a technology business review, whatever you want to call it. If you're not going to do them quarterly, they're sure as hell not quarterly business reviews. But if they spend $1,000 a year with you, they get 1 meeting a year. If they spend $2,000 a year with you, they get 2 strategic meetings a year. If they spend $4,000 a year with you, they get them quarterly. And I think there is a lot of, your numbers may differ, that you're depending on the size of your clients and those kind of things, but think about how often it really makes sense for you to have that strategic call with that person. And then figure out if the conversation that you're having with them weekly or bi-weekly is a tactical conversation versus a strategic conversation, because those should be broken out from your QBRs. They shouldn't be the same thing. That tactical conversation is, did we deliver on our service tickets? Are we meeting our SLAs? And that's a conversation with your support lead. It doesn't involve the owner. It doesn't involve the sales team. That is are we within our SLAs? Are we doing what we're supposed to be doing? The more you have those meetings with a fence around them and an agenda, you can whittle that down to monthly or less, especially with a 10-person client. But the last thing I would say is go out and assess that customer compared to your full stack, full solution. Because if they're on as break fix, they probably haven't consumed your whole stack. And make sure that you can show them the risk that they have today between the difference in risk they have today and the risk that they would have if they adopt your whole stack.
Right.
And we do that in a platform, but you can do it on paper. If you want a free trial of our platform and want to come do one in our platform, by all means, we'll help you through it. But it's about the difference between where they are today, status quo, and the increased cost. The more money they're going to spend to have more protection, more uptime, security, stability, reliability, all those things. And that's the message you have to get across. Some customers have to be beat over the head with it for a year before they buy in. But I would bring that conversation up and have that strategic business review every time you guys are meeting with them, or at least once or twice a year, until they decide, yeah, our business is big enough now that it's a real business and not just a hobby, and we care about it.
Right. Yeah. And
I'll get off my soapbox now.
No, I was going to say, and as a final note on that, there is a point where you might have to walk away from that customer and just be okay with it. Because we last year during the pandemic, we transitioned all of our customers off T&M to either MSP or to another MSP, to another break fix shop, because we decided that when we looked at our numbers and our staffing and everything, it didn't make sense to have any T&M in our practice. And I think it's powerful to be confident and say, hey, I think that it's great. We love working with you. This is how we're working together. And it's how we're working in the future because of this reason. And I can't give you the best work unless we do it this way. And you can. And then I would even say at times what we've done with some customers is we graduated them up, gave them a ramp so they could afford it and that sort of thing. Just, and that's a little wheeling dealing, but that's a good wheeling. But that's
them a win.
That's a win. That's a real customer. They know you, they like you. Get them on board and keep them on board. But, or if you have to, one of the things that may be holding you back is they may need a new firewall. Do a Haas firewall. Include it in the monthly cost. Whatever it is you think that would be the thing that make that deal close, don't have to lose it. But there is a wall, and you should have that. You should have a red line in your own mind, or even right now, that you're not willing to cross, and you have to be willing to walk away. So as I said, you guys, I think that's really important as well.
I would something I wanted to cover real quick. Okay, no, to cover real quick is go back to pricing a little bit. If I felt there was a competitive situation, I know they probably intuitively you probably want to put your lowest price out that you can do, but I actually would probably put about 15 to 20% on that number, and then I would probably say to the person if I had a good relationship with them when bidding, hey, listen, this is my price. But you know what? This gets to be competitive. I might have some room here, so let's talk. So you put that in their head. You got that 15 to 20% to play with. You're not locking yourself in where you're trying to be competitive when it's already a much lower price.
To that existing customer you've got, just one more twist on that. I would, when you're doing that risk assessment, make sure when you present it to them, your language is very specific. Mr. Customer, I want you to see all of your risk right here.
Yes.
And I'd like to talk to you about how you plan to handle that risk. I have a plan here that I can provide some help in mitigating it, but I can only mitigate so much of it. To be totally transparent with you, I have a $2 million insurance policy or whatever it is. If you were to get breached and have a real problem, you better have some insurance to go along with it, because these are your problems, and I'm going to go to my insurance company and say, we shouldn't pay out on this because I tried to get him to do all this stuff and he wouldn't do it, and here's the log of all the conversations. So not only do you need insurance, but you also need to figure out how you're going to deal with all this risk, because your insurance company probably won't pay out either when they figure out that you weren't doing the things you needed to do.
Right.
Rude awakening, but necessary, right?
Yes.
It's the unfortunate world we live in, right? Insurance companies are in the business to make money, just like all the rest of us. And if we were hemorrhaging money like they are, we'd be changing our pricing structure too.
Yeah,
man.
that's the truth.
Yeah.
Right?
Guys, we only got a couple minutes left, and I know that Alex has to go to another event, like right after this. He's a popular guy.
Yeah, do another webinar.
Yeah, so Alex, I just wanted to let folks know, I did drop a link into Lifecycle Insights, their website, right there in the chat. You guys should definitely check out Alex and the team there, what they're building and what they're working on. Alex is also all over the place in community forums and webinars, and as you can tell, he's got great advice. So Alex,
that's how you get customers to stick around for 13 years. You be where they are.
There you go.
Right.
That's
there you
the
go.
trick.
Alex is all
I
over.
appreciate the time always. George, very nice to meet you. Everybody
Pleasure
else,
to meet
good to see you again. Thanks everybody for your time today. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to find me on LinkedIn or hit me up from Lifecycle Insights website. And love to chat. Thank
you so much, sir. And the rest of you guys, stick around for a couple more minutes here, but Alex will let you go. And thank you so much. So before we head off and before we announce a couple more things about upcoming events and all that good stuff, George and Tom, I kind of wanted to give you some last words here, and Dom too. Actually, sitting here hearing this conversation. Don, let's start with you. Like, any kind of key takeaways? I mean, when I'm thinking about this, I look down at the polls we launched, and I see that, just a few answers here, but we got a majority of people saying either no, they don't have a defined sales process, or meh, kinda, which is really no. And then also going down to the second question, it's kind of split over here, but we do have several people who are just an owner themselves, responsible for sales. And I'm hearing some of the keys that Tom and George and Alex were saying is how important it is to be able to respond quickly, to get out in front of requests for information, those requests for a quote or whatever you got on your website, those form fields, calls to you, if you are responding to bids. The essence of speed, and Alex himself mentioning, like, a lot of times he lost deals not to a competitor, or not because of things the competitor did, but because he wasn't quick enough with his own process. Right. And so I guess I have some questions to Tom and to George around any advice around putting yourself in that position as an owner who doesn't have a lot of help yet. How you're developing the process, how you're carving out time to do that. And then, Dom, I'll kick it back over to you to maybe think of a takeaway too.
Yeah.
So, sure. I think the first thing is, if you're an owner, I think it's really important that you, especially if you're in charge of sales, is you make sure to allocate enough time to doing sales. I think, when we were a younger company, we did struggle with that owner operator fixing it as well. To do it, but I think you said an important, like, requests coming off the website, a form, referral, you have to answer within that day. Critically important, if not sooner. I mean, like, hours. We have a kind of a policy that it gets answered within the same day that a request comes to us. It's like after 4 o'clock, and then they say it's first thing in the morning, just to make sure that, because you just don't know why they're contacting you and why they're and unfortunately. That's kind of our jobs to do it. So, and the other thing is, I would highly recommend, if you can, if it's in your budget, work with someone to be an associate to help you with doing that kind of sales and that kind of day-to-day, even if it's a virtual assistant or something like that, because you just need someone to answer those. If you're getting a number of inquiries, if you're not getting a ton, I just recommend just make sure you have time for it, because that's really going to be, that's how you get customers. And I think a lot of times in the MSP business, we tend to forget that without sales, there's no business. I think a lot of people tend to have this bad habit of saying, like, well, I got to take care of my existing customers, which you absolutely do, but you really do need to have a sales process and, eventually a more robust sales mechanism and everything within your business.
Got to feed the beast.
Yeah.
Got to feed the beast.
I would just say, if you're a solo guy, if you're the owner doing the sales, if you have a sales team, whatever it is, first of all, you have that process, but also you have a CRM. And you're putting everything in that CRM.
That's true.
And you're hitting all those touches. You're doing things in that CRM, in your sales funnel. You set it up so, hey, we have a network eval within this many days of having contact with the prospect. Within this many days, we're going to deliver a proposal. And you communicate all those things to the prospect, and you do them on time, every time, and track that process. Otherwise, it's very easy to end up with things you left behind. You're supposed to give a proposal on this date. You don't. And that's a problem. One thing I wanted to speak about was, if you're going after government work, the only MSPs I've seen very successful at that had dedicated people to that process, proposal writers. And my thing would be, unless you're really going to put the time and energy and the money into that, to stay away from most of that kind of work. It's going to be competitive. It's going to be looking for a certain type of process, which is very hard to accommodate. I talked to a lot of MSPs that are putting in telecom quotes for municipalities or other things, and I'll tell you what, I just don't see those won typically by most MSPs.
Great point of going back to the competitive environments and the picking your battles, right?
Yeah.
And really knowing where to focus.
I have one other thing, Jonathan. I was going to say, if you commit to a customer to get the proposal or something out to them at time, if you don't do that, you've lost 1,000%, because that's the first moment of meeting expectations, and it's like the first SLA, if you want to think of it that way. And I can't, once again, just by pain. I learned that the hard way. But I would love everyone, the more you have to meet that deadline of, hey, I'm gonna get your proposal end of the day. If you don't get it till the next morning, you really screwed yourself and you put yourself in a corner.
Great points. And I mean, I know shame that Alex had to jump because I know he has going back to the point about having a CRM. Absolutely. I mean, there's a variety of solutions out there now, obviously, and there's more every day, right? Solutions across the board. But Alex was saying, even for getting started, he was just using a spreadsheet, to build out his own funnel and just kept himself organized. So I guess the point there being, you don't have to have necessarily a big system if you're just getting started. Don't let that be a barrier for you. You can start off in a simpler way.
Don't let the need for a tool get in the way of doing the work, because I mean, just in our own practice, we at times in the past we've really let that happen. We're like, we couldn't possibly do this until we had this full blown CRM that does all these certain magical things, and in reality is it's very still human driven, and people are doing things. So it'd be better to do them than it is to wait for a tool to do them for you. If you think about in the old days, I mean, Tom, when you built your business, how much CRM did you have in the initial couple of years you were doing it?
Oh yeah, I didn't have any until
Right.
I got a PSA, and there's usually one that's decent enough built in there.
Right.
But I'll tell you what, as I got busy and I got past that first 5 years, all of a sudden I was missing deadlines, like you were talking, and that killed me. I mean, you're hours late, or the next day, probably not going to get the deal. And so
Correct.
at least put it in a calendar when the deliverables are, communicate that with the prospect, make sure you do things on time.
Exactly.
Great points. Dom, do you want to, any takeaways from you, and then you want to direct people to the doc and what's going on for our next live chat and upcoming stuff?
Yeah, I guess I'll start by saying, number one takeaway I have off of everything that Tom, George, and Alex are saying is, it's so important to be agile in business. Small business owner expects you to be agile as an MSP, as a business owner. So being agile is great, maybe not too agile, where you're almost juking yourself out with the deals you're making. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's the main takeaway I'd have today, is that. Outside of that, looking forward, with the document here, we have some great takeaways for you guys, some great resources, some great little memes in there and GIFs as well. But yeah, number one, definitely take advantage of this resource here, the sales process guide and checklist. It's going to help take everything we kind of said today and make it into a consumable resource with those actual checklists, those actual kind of boxes that you can fill in with writing and actually bring to conversations with those key stakeholders at a small business. So definitely download that. Good article there from Gong that Jonathan has also included. And then looking forward, we're going to have a live chat on September 16th, 2 weeks from now, about finding and hiring the best techs. I believe we have Bowman Williams joining us there, and some other folks that are going to be talking about some strategies to do retain and also recruit some of that top tech talent out there. We know it's hard right now to do that. So we hope to see you there. And thank you all for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Dom. Thank you, George, so much for taking time out of your day.
Thank you.
The day after the flooding and everything. Good luck with your client who thankfully had their server a couple of feet above sea level.
Only by luck, not by planning.
But thank you so much for everybody interested in learning more. George is president of Valiant Technology, and he, along with the team there, do so much good content. They are an inspiration for all MSPs out there. They have a live stream that goes on every Thursday. They had one earlier today. Check out their YouTube page for the live streams and check out that. They have great information for SMBs, but also for fellow MSPs too. So George, thank you so much for
thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tom, thank you so much for calling in from the cafe. Good luck. I hope you're not stuck there for 2 more days over the weekend. I know it's pretty hairy.
Well, I'm taking the Acela, the relatively high-speed train down to DC. So hopefully that's going to take off in about an hour.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll let you go. Thank you so much for taking the time here. And everybody again on the call, really love having you guys. These live chats are always a highlight for us. Check out the resources doc. We'll be following up with an email that has a link to that doc and also a link to the recording if you want to revisit, share with the team, etc. And we hope to see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks, everybody.
All right, awesome.
Take care.
Thanks,
Stay
everyone.
safe.
I know.